What is the name of the last person you met? Can you remember? Do you think they remember your name? Have you ever had that awkward moment when you're talking to someone and realize that they don't actually remember your name? Or maybe you don't actually remember their name correctly either. Or they mispronounce your name and it gets mangled. Growing up with my maiden name, well, I can't tell you how many ways people mispronounce Kirsten. And then my maiden name, Stanglin, more often was strange land than not. I have a friend whose last name was Craig, and even at our seminary graduation, when he was called up for his diploma, they pronounced it Crabby. That's just kind of smart. Or have you ever encountered someone who had the audacity to tell you that you did not spell your name correctly? Or that your name isn't a real name? I suspect that Gwyneth Paltrow's daughter, Apple, has already heard that a million times. And so have so many people who come into this country from other cultures, and we're just not used to names that aren't really easy to pronounce and preferably one syllable. I think so many of us, myself included, in our small world ways get frustrated when names aren't pronounced the ways that we think they should be. But then I look at some of the names through my genealogy and I figure they would probably think our names are really strange today. Some of our parents have just been a little overly creative in this gift that they give us that lasts beyond a lifetime. And sometimes we might be thankful for that uniqueness. But other times we might wish that we could find our name on that rack of personalized keychains or mugs or ornaments just once. Just once. That's not too much, is it? Well, there is a story that has been credited to so many people about a final exam that was given in a college business course. The students studied for weeks, memorizing every formula and every theory. And they sat down that day in class, and on the paper in front of them was one question. What is the name of the janitor who empties the trash in this hall? Names are important. It matters when someone knows our name. And when we know their name, it means that we value one another, we respect one another, that the other person makes a difference in our lives, no matter how small. Knowing names bridges communities, and it builds relationships. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to invite you to move to somebody that you're not related to, because that would be too easy. And to find out that person's full name, first, middle, last, maiden name if they have one. Were they named for someone? Do they like their name? What does their name mean to them? Get up and move. raise your hand if you need more time. You all good? Okay. Now that we're all a little bit more connected,
Hello.
go ahead and have a seat.
I'm right up with the church.
And we're going to hear more about this parable that Jesus told us. You see, the parable that we find in Luke today, it's a short story. And it's not intended to be a complete theology. Nor is it meant to be a how to get to heaven for dummies manual. But we are to search this parable to find out how it affects us. What does it mean to us today? And as the scene opens, we observe two men. One is quite wealthy. If we were to imagine him today, we might think of a CEO of a large bank maybe, with more millions than he knew what to do with. A private jet, a house in the Hamptons, one in Hawaii, chefs to cook for him at home, servants to clean for him, others to run his errands. With all the time he spends on the golf course, one might wonder when he ever actually works, but he must because he has thousands of employees underneath him. And one of the perks of his position is that if he messes up, he can just blame them. This is a man who doesn't feel that he needs anyone or anything. He considers himself a self-made man, and he credits himself with all of his accomplishments. Now, on the other side, this other man we meet, well, if we were to think of him in modern day times, we might imagine someone who comes from a long line of lack of education, with barely 2 nickels to rub together. A veteran maybe, who never healed completely, mentally or physically or emotionally, from his battle scars. And he's probably lost most hope in ever really holding down a job. He has a faithful canine companion as his only real friend, but no roof or walls to call his own. And he often scavenges through the wealthy man's trash looking for scraps. And when he sees him, he begs for odd jobs here and there. But the wealthy man has so many servants to do his bidding, he can't keep it all straight. Well, this poor man has a name. He's actually the only character in any of Jesus' parables to have a name. It's Lazarus, which means El Azar, God helps. And that may seem a little ironic, except for Lazarus knows that he needs God's help to get through each and every day. Now Jesus continues with the story that when these men die, the one who loved his money, who was all wrapped up in himself and maybe his immediate family, continued to be stuck in the mindset of imagining that Lazarus was somehow beneath him, less than him, not as good as him, and should do his bidding for him. He should bring him water. He should go and warn his brothers. This man didn't get it. He didn't get that he was the one alone who put the chasm between himself and God with his greed and self-centeredness. And he didn't understand that God knew Lazarus' name because Lazarus had called upon him. Well, he himself had never offered up his name. He just assumed that everyone should know it. Well, throughout this Gospel of Luke that we've been going through week after week, sometimes it seems like we are just getting hit over the head with all of these constant messages of social justice and economic justice. And we have been invited to offer up to God what God has first given us, ourselves, our time, our possessions, our names even. And in this parable, Jesus takes to task an ancient ideology from Israel that if one was wealthy, it meant that God was blessing them because of their obedience. And if one was poor, it meant that God was punishing them because of their sinfulness. This made it easy to justify not being generous because who wants to mess with God's justice? You know, come to think of it, I don't think this is always such an ancient idea. I think this carries through to modern times when we find excuses to not be generous, to hold up for ourselves that which God has given us, but we don't want to give out. But Jesus is quite clear in this parable that that absolutely is not the truth. And we are warned that whenever we get so wrapped up in ourselves, in our greed, in our fear of scarcity, in our quest for status and power, that we are causing a great divide. And that division grows each and every time we imagine for a moment that someone is less than us or not as good as us for any reason. See, Lazarus' name is true. God has helped him, and God knows Lazarus' name. And the story is true for us too, where we can recognize that whenever we are feeling alone, or dark, or empty, or fearful, that Jesus comes to us bringing his light, claiming us in the baptismal waters, filling us with himself in the bread and the wine. And we can rest assured in the bosom of Abraham that we belong to God and God is our God. And so we learn the names of those in our community. And we bridge that divide between mansion and curb. Because God knows our name.